Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really rich collection of source material excerpts that pull us right into, well, the heart of a classic country house mystery.
Exactly. We're talking sprawling estates, pretty intense family dynamics, and then this sudden, perplexing death that just throws everything into chaos.
It really does. These sources give us a kind of ringside seat, don't they? To the initial events, the very first steps of the investigation at this place called Styles Court.
Absolutely. It's a chance to really dig into how a complex puzzle gets assembled, piece by piece right before our eyes.
And our mission in this deep dive, well, we want to be your guides through these early chapters. We'll introduce you to the key players, sift through the baffling clues that pop up almost immediately.
Explore how suspicion starts shifting, from one person to another.
Yeah, and uncover how those first glimmers of maybe a surprising truth begin to emerge from what seems like a pretty straightforward case at first glance.
Think of it as a guided exploration. We're focusing purely on what these specific texts reveal about those critical moments and the people caught up in them.
Precisely. Based on these sources, we're going to focus on that initial setup, the underlying family tensions simmering before the tragedy.
Right, the immediate aftermath of the death and those crucial first steps in the inquiry.
It's really about extracting the essential facts and, maybe more importantly, identifying the pieces that just don't quite seem to fit the picture yet.
So where do we start? The story, it's framed through the eyes of this character, Hastings. He's back from the front, invalided home.
Right, needing somewhere to stay, and he just happens to run into an old acquaintance, John Cavendish.
Yeah, and John invites him down to his mother's place, Styles Court, in Essex. Hastings knew it from years ago, apparently.
Gives him a bit of history with the place, but he's definitely stepping into a household that's, well, clearly changed.
And that change seems to center largely around the matriarch, Mrs. Cavendish, or rather, Mrs. Inglethorpe now. She's remarried.
Described as quite a striking figure, isn't she? Handsome, white-haired, with the text says a masterful cast of features.
Yeah, and what the sources make clear right from the get-go is the financial dynamic. Her late husband left her Styles for her lifetime.
And the bulk of his income, too.
Which the text explicitly notes was, well, pretty unfair to his two sons from his first marriage.
Those sons being John, our narrator's friend, and the younger one, Lawrence. John's in his mid-40s.
Used to be a barrister, now living as a country squire at Styles. He's married to Mary Cavendish. She lives there, too.
And there's this definite sense that John feels, I don't know, financially strained, like maybe he wished his mother had just given him more money instead of, having him live on the estate.
Definitely that undercurrent. And Mary Cavendish is interesting, too, described with just a hint of something foreign about her.
And Lawrence, the younger son.
He's presented as more delicate, qualified as a doctor, but then gave it up for literary ambitions, also living at Styles.
Okay, and then the really significant new presence in the house, Alfred Inglethorpe, Mrs. Inglethorpe's new husband.
Notably younger, right, about 20 years her junior.
And Hastings takes this immediate, almost visceral dislike to him, calls it firm and rooted.
Yeah, Hastings observes this suggestion of deference in Alfred's manner towards his wife, but also notes this palpable sense of constraint, a kind of veiled hostility that settles on everyone when he's around.
It's pretty clear he's not exactly a popular addition to the family.
Not at all. Then there's Cynthia Murdoch, a young woman about 18.
Mrs. Inglethorpe took her in after her parents died. Her mother was a school friend who married a rascally solicitor.
Right. Cynthia sounds lively, fresh-faced. She works as a dispenser at the Red Cross hospital nearby.
And interestingly, it mentions she once made up some bromide powders for Mrs. Inglethorpe.
Yeah, that detail seems totally innocuous at first, doesn't it? But it becomes surprisingly important later on.
And finally, we've got Evelyn Howard, Evie, a sturdy relative of Mrs. Inglethorpe's.
And she makes absolutely no secret of her intense dislike for Alfred Inglethorpe.
Intense is putting it mildly. Calls him a rascally adventurer.
Doesn't mince words at all. Warns Hastings and others that Alfred would as soon murder you in your bed as look at you.
Which is just, wow, a dramatic statement right up front. And she leaves Styles pretty soon after Hastings arrives, doesn't she?
She does. Removes that very outspoken, critical voice from the immediate scene. The sources also mention a couple of key staff. Dorcas, the loyal old-fashioned servant.
Been with Mrs. Inglethorpe for 10 years.
And Annie, another housemaid. So that kind of rounds out our initial cast of characters living in this pressure cooker.
And you said pressure cooker. You really do feel these rising tensions almost straight away. The whole family structure seems fragile.
Heavily influenced by Mrs. Inglethorpe controlling the finances. Gives her the whip hand, as the source puts it.
Yeah. Even though she'd apparently been generous, that original will, leaving most things to her, clearly, rankled the sons.
And Evelyn Howard leaving right after those really damning warnings about Alfred, marrying for money, even capable of murder, it leaves a strong impression.
Even if Hastings kind of dismisses the murder bit initially as just hyperbole.
Still, it plants that seed of suspicion around Alfred right away.
Then there's this seemingly chance encounter that, well, changes everything. Hastings bumps into his old friend Hercule Poirot in the village.
Right, the famous Belgian detective. He's living locally among other Belgian refugees. And Cynthia knows him too.
And Hastings recounts all these stories of Poirot's past cases, building him up as someone with, remarkable skills.
That meeting is so crucial. It establishes Poirot's presence nearby, his reputation, before the crime even happens.
Makes his involvement later feel natural, almost awaited.
Gives you that sense that if something were to go wrong, he's the guy you'd call.
And something certainly does go wrong. That afternoon before the tragedy, things feel particularly fraught.
Mrs. Inglethorpe comes back from the village, looking visibly upset, flushed.
And the sources describe this overheard exchange, right, between Mary Cavendish and Mrs. Inglethorpe.
Yeah, Mary's heard accusing her stepmother of shielding him, presumably Alfred.
But Mrs. Inglethorpe denies it has anything to do with Mary, refuses to show her some papers she's holding. It's just a moment of clear conflict, secrecy.
Right, within the family, just hours before she dies.
Later that evening, Dr. Bauerstein visits. Mrs. Inglethorpe goes up to bed around 9 p.m. She takes her coffee with her.
But states she hasn't tasted it yet, which seems like an odd detail to mention.
And then Alfred Inglethorpe makes a point of announcing he's off to the village to see his agent.
Conspicuously takes the latchkey, tells everyone not to wait up for him.
These little actions, the statements, untasted coffee, Alfred taking the key, declaring where he's going, they seem so ordinary at the time.
But they become critically important details when you look back later. They absolutely set the stage for what happens that night.
Which brings us to the night itself. Hastings is woken up in the early hours, July 16th going into the 17th.
By Lawrence shouting, sounds coming from Mrs. Inglethorpe's room in the right wing.
They rush to her door, but it's bolted from the inside.
They struggle to break it down, adds this layer of desperation, confinement to the whole scene.
And inside, they find her on the bed, clearly in violent convulsions. She's knocked over a table next to the bed.
Dr. Bauerstein is called, and his reaction is described as peculiar. Immediately makes Hastings suspicious.
Hastings gets the strong impression that Bauerstein suspects poison.
And acting on that chilling suspicion, Hastings whispers his belief to Mary Cavendish about poison.
Her reaction is just extreme. No, not that. Turns deadly pale, rushes upstairs.
It's a powerful reaction, isn't it? Almost guilty seeming.
So seeing these signs, the doctor's suspicion, Hastings suggests calling in Poirot straight away. Makes sense, right? Suspected foul play.
But Lawrence reacts really strongly, angrily even, dismisses the idea completely.
Thinks Bauerstein's imagining things. Seeing poisons everywhere because it's his specialty. Calls it a mare's nest.
Yeah, and Hastings notes how unusually forceful Lawrence's reaction is. It makes you wonder, why would he be so against involving a detective if it was just, a medical issue?
Right. Another piece of the puzzle. So the next morning, the official investigation kicks off, and Hastings goes to fetch Poirot.
On the way, he bumps into Alfred Inglethorpe, who's supposedly just returning to the house.
Alfred's story is he forgot his latchkey, had to stay at his Agent Denby's place in the village.
Hastings is immediately skeptical, finds his whole performance as the grieving husband really unconvincing. Hypocritical, he calls it, just doesn't buy the alibi.
So Poirot arrives, and his focus is immediate, laser sharp. Goes straight to the fireplace in Mrs. Inglethorpe's room.
Uses forceps, carefully retrieves this small piece of half-charred paper from the ashes.
And Hastings recognizes it instantly. It's a fragment of a will.
Poirot's reaction is telling. He's not surprised, says he expected it.
Confirms his initial gut feeling, maybe, that the death is tied to the family money, the inheritance.
Seems likely. So Poirot starts interviewing the household. Talks to Dorcas, the old servant. She's initially a bit reserved.
But Poirot quickly gets her trust, doesn't he? Emphasizes that telling the truth is the best way to honor her mistress if there was foul play.
And Dorcas becomes fiercely loyal, cooperative, agrees there's one in this house responsible, though she doesn't name names.
She recounts finding Mrs. Inglethorpe really upset the previous afternoon after a quarrel. staring at a piece of paper.
Her mistress whispered, "These few words and everything's changed," and added, "Never trust a man."
Then Mary Cavendish came in, cut the conversation short. Dorcas also mentions Mrs. Inglethorpe meant to lock the paper in her purple dispatch case.
But she'd lost the key around lunchtime, though she did have a duplicate somewhere.
More details come from Annie, the housemaid who found the body. Confirms the door was locked from inside.
She also mentions finding a broken coffee cup near the fireplace. Notes Mrs. Inglethorpe had picked it up and placed it there.
Crucially, she says the coffee in that cup was untouched.
Untouched. Annie also adds she brought Mrs. Inglethorpe her usual cocoa around midnight and saw some salt on the tray near the pot.
Oh, and another detail. The bell in Mrs. Inglethorpe's room was broken the night before.
Yeah, broken before the incident. And this is where Hastings, trying to play detective,
Jumps to a conclusion. He figures the cocoa must have been poisoned with the salt, explaining the delayed reaction.
But Poirot, ever calm, just offers this simple, almost deflating observation. It might have been salt.
Doesn't dismiss it, but doesn't leap either. He's just gathering all the little details.
Speaking of details, he then examines the 5 coffee cups left over from tea the previous afternoon.
Mrs. Inglethorpe, Hastings, Cynthia, Lawrence, John. Alfred didn't have any. Poirot takes samples.
And Hastings notes this puzzling, almost relieved look on Poirot's face for a moment, which he then seems to push aside.
Another small detail. All the cups had sugar in them, even though Cynthia never takes sugar in her coffee.
A minor inconsistency, maybe? But Poirot files it away.
So the official proceedings continue. The coroner's inquest confirms the cause of death. Strychnine poisoning.
So the poison theory was right. And then comes this damning testimony from the village chemist's assistant, Mr. Mace.
He says he sold strychnine to a man resembling Alfred Inglethorpe the day before the murder, and the man signed the poison register.
But when Alfred Inglethorpe testifies, he flatly denies buying it, shows his signature.
Which is utterly dissimilar to the one in the register.
Right, and when they press him about where he was on the evening of the 16th.
He claims he just can't remember. Denies being with anyone or meeting anyone.
The coroner's comment is so dryly understated. It's a pity he can't remember.
Then more motive surfaces. The gardeners testify they witnessed a will being made by Mrs. Inglethorpe.
In favor of Alfred Inglethorpe.
That same afternoon, between 4:30 and 5 p.m.
Which strongly suggests Alfred had a motive, especially if maybe a previous will favoring the sons was about to be destroyed or replaced.
Dorcas testifies about the quarrel. But her loyalty to the young gentleman is really clear. She fiercely insists she heard Mr. Inglethorpe's voice, not John's.
Even though the defense wasn't even denying John was there, shows her trying to protect them.
Then this seemingly random detail comes up. A parcel that arrived for Lawrence Cavendish back in June. From Parkson's, a theatrical costumiers.
Dorcas doesn't recall it, says Miss Howard handled things like that.
So Miss Howard is called, and she confirms finding some dusty brown paper with an initial on it.
On top of the prisoner's wardrobe, after being asked to search by Poirot.
And at this point, the prisoner is clearly John Cavendish. Shows exactly where suspicion has landed.
And an assistant from Parkson's, the costumier, then testifies. Confirms selling a black beard.
To a man resembling Inglethorpe back in June. How does that fit in? It's bizarre.
And then Annie comes back, corroborates seeing the prisoner, John Cavendish, take the coffee into the boudoir before Mrs. Inglethorpe went up.
So the evidence presented at the inquest really paints this very strong, though maybe misleading, picture pointing straight at John.
Indeed. The verdict is willful murder, by person or persons unknown. But the focus, clearly on John.
As the investigation moves forward, Poirot starts making these quiet, often puzzling deductions. He talks with Japp from Scotland Yard.
And notes something interesting. Mary Cavendish, whose room was further away, heard the table fall in Mrs. Inglethorpe's room.
But Cynthia, who was closer, apparently didn't hear a thing.
Poirot remarks she must be a famous sleeper. It seems like such a small observation.
But with Poirot, every detail matters, doesn't it? He's highlighting an anomaly. Why didn't Cynthia hear it if Mary did?
Exactly. Then, in classic Poirot style, he gives Hastings this cryptic message for Lawrence Cavendish.
Find the extra coffee cup, and you can rest in peace. Hastings is completely baffled. What extra cup?
Meanwhile, Alfred Inglethorpe leaves Styles, removes himself from the scene, which is maybe a relief, but also removes the most obvious suspect.
John feels guilty for having suspected him. And the financial strain on John, discussed around the inheritance, keeps that potential motive for the sons simmering.
More little clues surface. Dorcas mentions a dressing-up box in the attic. Notes Poirot had asked about green fabrics, suggests a green dress might be up there.
So Poirot and Hastings search the box. No green dress.
But they do find something else significant, a new trimmed black beard right at the bottom.
And Poirot confirms it's the beard used by the person who bought the strychnine, and it was meticulously trimmed.
To match Mr. Inglethorpe's beard, Poirot compliments the intelligence of whoever hid it there.
This is fascinating. It links the beard and the strychnine purchase directly back to the house, and specifically to someone maybe trying to frame Alfred or impersonate him.
Poirot then makes another interesting move, tells Hastings he needs an ally in the house, someone not associated with him.
Suggests Miss Howard is the very person.
He also tells Hastings he'll be invaluable but not sufficient, which predictably wounds Hastings' pride a bit.
Shows Poirot uses specific skills from people around him. Hastings is useful, but not the primary investigator here.
Poirot speaks to Miss Howard, subtly suggests her gut instinct about the killer points to a name other than Alfred.
This apparently causes her great distress, hinting that maybe her strong dislike of Alfred was obscuring another, more painful suspicion.
Could be. Then Hastings delivers that extra coffee cup message to Lawrence,
Who's startled, but seems to understand, and is relieved. What does he think that cup means?
Poirot continues his seemingly scattered inquiries, questions Hastings closely about Cynthia's dispensary at the hospital.
The layout, where the poison cupboard is, the policy for the key.
Clearly signals his interest in a potential source of the poison outside that village chemist purchase.
And Mary Cavendish shares some personal history with Hastings. Her Russian mother, being left badly off, finding life with her aunts deadly before meeting John.
Hints her aunts approved of the marriage, but doesn't say outright if she's unhappy now. Hastings senses something, though.
Adds another layer to the dynamics, doesn't it? Suggests Mary's feelings, her motivations, might be more complex than they first appear.
Definitely. So, with all these threads dangling, the beard, the cups, the lost key, the quarrels, the possible second will, the dispensary questions, how does Poirot finally figure it out?
That fourth letter from Mrs. Inglethorpe, the untraceable one, finally found. But it's just about Russian folk songs, a total red herring.
Right. And remember, Poirot visiting Cynthia's hospital, Hastings noted Poirot went on a day Cynthia wasn't there.
Seems strange. Why avoid the person who works there if you're asking about the place?
It absolutely did. But then Lawrence tells Hastings he thinks he's found the extra coffee cup.
Okay, but what cup did Lawrence find?
The critical reveal comes when Poirot explains where he found an extra cup, on top of the poison cupboard in Cynthia's dispensary at the hospital.
And it had Lawrence's finger marks on it.
Poirot reveals he created a distraction, dropped his hat from a balcony specifically to get a moment alone to check that cupboard.
And the bottle inside the cupboard, the one Lawrence's fingerprints were on,
contained hydrochloride of strychnine, the kind used for making pills. This looks incredibly damning for Lawrence.
It does, but it's not the full picture. Remember the dusty brown paper Miss Howard found on the prisoner's wardrobe?
Poirot later gets it from her. It has the initial J or L on it, and Poirot confirms he asked her to search John's wardrobe.
So, Lawrence's fingerprints on poison at the hospital and paper maybe linking John or Lawrence found in John's room. What does this mean?
This is where Poirot unravels the true, really ingenious method. It wasn't the coffee. It wasn't the cocoa.
It was her medicine, her ordinary tonic.
Exactly. Which contained both strychnine sulfate and potassium bromide.
And here's where the chemistry comes in, right? From that dispensing textbook Poirot found.
Yes. That combination, when mixed, causes the strychnine salt to deposit over time. It concentrates the poison in the last dose in the bottle.
And Alfred Inglethorpe's stroke of genius, mentioned in his letters,
was adding extra potassium bromide to the mixture,
which sped up the process.
Sped up the deposition, making that final dose Mrs. Inglethorpe took that night lethally concentrated. The bromide also masked the bitter taste of the strychnine.
So the poison wasn't just mixed into a drink. It was manipulated within her regular medicine, using chemistry for a delayed action poison hidden in plain sight.
That's really unexpected. The danger wasn't some foreign substance, but something she took regularly, just subtly weaponized.
Okay, what about the other strange stuff? The broken cup, the locked door, the bell.
All misdirection, created by Alfred. Poirot explains he broke the coffee cup himself in Emily's room after she was dead.
To make it look like she died after drinking coffee and knocked the table over.
Precisely. The bell wasn't broken by her struggle. It was broken before that evening, and the door. It wasn't truly bolted from inside. Alfred had a way to lock it from the outside, making it look bolted.
Even Cynthia being out of the house that day was arranged by Alfred through Emily.
He orchestrated everything. He was plotting with a Mrs. Rakes. His confession letters eventually revealed the whole plan.
So where do the letters fit in? How did they surface?
Alfred made a critical mistake. He wrote an incriminating letter to Mrs. Rakes detailing their plot. Mrs. Inglethorpe found this letter in his desk.
That was the great shock Dorcas saw.
Exactly. That's what caused her to burn the new will she'd just made in Alfred's favor.
And her dying words, Alfred, Alfred, Mary, Mary.
An accusation against Alfred, yes, but Poirot also interprets it as a plea for Mary to protect someone, maybe the family name, maybe John specifically, from the scandal.
Wow. Okay, but what about all the other strange actions? Lawrence with the beard and the dispensary cup, Mary hiding Cynthia's cup, the blackmail note.
This is where Poirot admits his investigation was this complex labyrinth. He used deliberate misdirection, even let Hastings deceive himself sometimes.
The anonymous blackmail note to John.
Written by Alfred himself, not a real blackmailer. It was a fake alibi to get John out of the way, potentially.
Yeah.
Cold-blooded calculation.
Absolutely. And Lawrence.
His frantic actions, crushing the coffee cup, pushing the natural causes idea, searching for the extra cup, even his fingerprints on the poison bottle. They were all attempts to shield Cynthia.
Because he loves her.
Yes. He found that brown paper with J or L on John's wardrobe, found the beard in the dressing-up box. He connected them to John or himself. He feared one of them might be guilty, but mostly he feared Cynthia could somehow be implicated because she worked at the dispensary.
He thought she might have used the bromide.
Possibly. His angry reaction earlier about calling Poirot, part of this desperate attempt to keep things quiet, protect her. Cynthia saying earlier that Lawrence disliked her was just, as Poirot puts it, les femmes. A misunderstanding on her part.
And the extra coffee cup riddle. That message.
There were basically 2 extra cups causing confusion. Lawrence found Cynthia's cup from tea, the one Mary Cavendish had hidden.
Why did Mary hide it?
Mary thought John was guilty, so she hid Cynthia's cup to remove any potential evidence suggesting someone else, specifically Cynthia, who worked with bromide, could have poisoned Emily using a cup.
So Lawrence found that cup, thinking it was the one Poirot meant, the one that would clear things up somehow.
Exactly. While Poirot, meanwhile, was focused on the other cup, the one with Lawrence's fingerprints on the dispensary cupboard. That showed Lawrence's access to the poison source, likely while trying to figure out how to protect Cynthia. Just a perfect storm of misunderstandings and protective actions clouding the truth.
It's just layers upon layers, people trying to shield each other, sometimes the guilty, but often the innocent they care about, all based on their own limited view.
Precisely. And in a final, almost unexpected twist from Poirot, he admits his intricate plotting during the trial, letting events unfold as they did. It had another purpose. Beyond just revealing the murderer.
Another purpose, what?
He wanted to bring John and Mary Cavendish back together.
Bring them back together, how?
They drifted apart. Misunderstandings, pride, separate entanglements. John with Mrs. Rakes, the same woman Alfred was plotting with.
And Mary with Dr. Bauerstein.
Yeah, though Poirot didn't think Mary genuinely cared for Bauerstein, suggested the doctor was maybe using her to cover his own activities, his vagaries.
So the trial, the shared adversity,
forced them to rely on each other. Facing the possibility of John being convicted, it rekindled their connection, their love.
Wow. So the great detective wasn't just solving a murder, he was also kind of playing matchmaker.
In a way, yes, manipulating events for a deeply human outcome. And amidst all this turmoil, Cynthia finds happiness too, now that Lawrence's feelings for her are finally out in the open.
Looking back on this deep dive into styles, it's incredible how the initial, seemingly clear picture was just anything but.
The true method of murder was hidden right in plain sight, in ordinary medicine, not some dramatic, obvious poisoning.
And the house was just full of misdirection, not just from the killer, but from others acting out of fear, love, limited understanding, trying to protect the people they cared about.
Everyone reacting based on their own partial view of what was happening.
It really underscores how often our perceptions, of people and events, even those closest to us, are based on such incomplete information. So many quiet dramas, hidden actions unfolding beneath that polite surface.
Indeed. It leaves you with a pretty powerful thought, doesn't it? How often are the most crucial secrets the key details, hidden not in some remote, mysterious place, but right under our noses? Embedded in the mundane, just waiting for someone to look closely enough and connect the seemingly unconnected dots.